Well, good afternoon. It's been an absolutely incredible day, rich with content, rich with expertise, and we'll do our best to live up to that. To begin, I just want to say thank you. It's always an honor to be included in this prestigious conference, and I appreciate it. So, to begin, again, my name is Geoff Brown. I work at Recorded Future, and I was a previous CISO for a small city over the other side of the Atlantic called New York. And I'm joined today with some wonderful experts in their field. First, I'd like to introduce Jessica Keiser, Vice President for the Cyber Defense Center at Bayer AG. Second, I'd like to introduce Thomas Rosteck, Division President of the Connected Secure Systems at Infineon. Third, I'd like to introduce Erkki, Leego, who is Director of the EU CyberNet at the Estonian Information System Authority. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Thomas Boué, who is at BSA, the Software Alliance, out of Washington, D.C. I may have tripped over some of the names, but I did my very best to pronounce them correctly. And I welcome everybody. So to open up, very simply, there's some words that we hear in our industry quite often. Information sharing, public-private partnership, secure by design, operational collaboration, and now sometimes we hear this word integration and interoperability. And I think sometimes when we think about team play, I have to ask a question, are these just words? Are they just concepts? Are they real? Are they effective? Are we actually doing these things in a meaningful way? Are we executing? Or are they an aspiration, something we still need to achieve? And our conference theme is who's in charge. And this panel, again, is about team play. Team often implies sport. And I can read a quote from the former US National Cyber Director, Chris Inglis. My guess is many of you have this committed to memory, but for those of you that haven't committed it, here is the quote. The only reasonable solution is to get serious about defense, to make defense the new offense, such that if you're an adversary in this space, you've got to beat us all to beat one of us. That requires an investment upfront on resilience, robustness, not just in data and systems, but in roles and responsibilities. That's how you defend collaboration. And confidence, too, so that you need to make sure that everyone in the system understands what role they play in the defense of that system, so that everyone can participate in their own defense. So when we think about team play, we think about sport, that quote comes to mind. And I'm a little bit surprised we haven't heard it quite yet today, so I'm glad that I was the first one to use it. And we'll open up with a simple question, because we have an example of team play at work right now. So, to Erkki, can you provide an example of how you see team play working?
Thank you, Geoff. I have two examples for kind of a outside organization team play. And as I'm director of EU CyberNet, which is European Commission cyber capacity building initiative for third countries. And in the center of this EU CyberNet, we have 300 cyber experts from 38 competence areas, from 27 European Union member states, for cyber capacity building actions in third countries like some Dominican Republic, Kenya, and so on. So this is a bunch of cyber experts from very different areas, and how you make this team work. And one important part, being all over Europe, is to get these people talk to each other. So one way to make these missions work, and they go to missions in different countries, having this kind of international teams from different areas, from public and private sector, we have this setting of monthly EU CyberNet Club, which is Chatham House, community-based. We have every time good speakers from our own network. And this is a place where we build this kind of awareness from different areas, attribution, 5G and so on, whatever is relevant at the moment. And then they have this open talk. And this is a little bit the awareness side, but it's very important that they have this kind of doing things together, so the community side of that. And this is something we can relate to all these international activities. And second example I have from Estonia, and we are building cyber reserve, which is kind of a voluntary-based cyber resilience group. And it's 3-level, meant to help critical infrastructure organizations in time of incidents. So there will be first-level response from national MCSC, where these first responders go to help this critical infrastructure organization. When, say, the incident will prolong longer, or there will be another competencies needed, then there will be second level of cyber volunteers coming from national cyber houses. We call it from national government IT houses, and they come together and help mitigate this crisis. And third level, when there is not enough hands on the tech, or we don't, the crisis will prolong longer, then we have this National Cyber Defense League available for their volunteers from, say, Cyber Court. And this 3-level from different cybersecurity experts from different levels. They have this also very loose connections with each other. A very important part of that community is that we have joint exercises, we have joint trainings, and especially important is to share context with this volunteer group of cyber experts. And both of these communities have common that you need to rehearse together. So you have this community feeling around this bunch of different cybersecurity experts. So these are 2 places where we can see that we can have cross borders from public and private, can cross borders from different regions, and they actually work together to mitigate cyber crises.
So in a previous panel, Phil Venables said he is a, if I get this right, a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. I think that gives me a lot of long-term optimism. Sometimes I remain, though, like Phil, a short-term pessimist, and that leads me to sort of my second question. But my second question is a bit of a reflection on my own time as CISO in New York City. We were an incredible participant in the great community, many partners fielded into the mission, but oftentimes when I woke up in the morning and I went to bed at night, I felt like it was my team in a trench, in the fight, and it was a solo sport. That's just the feeling. That's the feeling of a defender. So I turn to a defender today, and I want to ask a question. And it's a tough question. Can we discuss where maybe team play isn't working?
I'm also going to start first with a positive example.
That's good.
So where I see that teamwork is working is, you see them here on the screen here, CSSA. So my company is also part of CSSA, and it's basically a sharing alliance between different big German-based companies. And there, over the years, they build up a good relationship, and basically we're sharing very practically, we're sharing information about incidents, we're sharing IOCs, so it's very hands-on. And for me, this is a perfect example of how I can scale up my team. Because basically I just have the amount of team members in my team, but by working together with other companies, we're kind of, we're a team, and we share each other's knowledge on what is happening, really happening in our system, really happening day to day. So that's, I would say, a positive example. Then going back to your question, like the times where we are by ourselves, that's basically when and I don't want to make it too pessimistic, but still, that's basically when I have contact with government agencies. So, yeah.
Are you brave enough to say that again?
I'm going to say that we also have positive experiences, but as already mentioned in one of the previous panels, there's just a broad group of government agencies. So that's also very difficult for us, because then we get a phone call from somebody at a certain government agency that we don't know, that also doesn't trust us, but then says, your company is going to be attacked. Yeah, thank you. It's being attacked every day. So, and then unfortunately that information first goes to the CEO or the CFO or whoever. So then that has high visibility, which means, I mean, we always react on that, but now we definitely need to react on that and go and find the needle. Plus we need to do communication about it. So these kind of I would say, exchanges don't really help, because then if we go and ask for more details, they're telling us, no, we can't give more details. Yeah, okay. After a while, we then figure out that it's basically our own system that is attacking us, because we're also, I mean, we're also testing ourselves the whole time, and that's basically what they are noticing. So until now, it was always good for us that it was never serious, but the problem is that it brings an enormous internal effort to the teams in such a way that internally there's a bad mood about public government agencies. However, going back to also positive, we think that it is really important to build up a relationship. So what we do is that we do proactively also contact them, try to get into sessions with them. But there are boundaries, because they can't show favoritism towards one or two companies. So that has limits. But I do see that there's willingness also from them to improve and learn.
So I think we've drawn a little bit of a sketch around the operational picture, and that's important. And there is positive and negative. Hands-ons, you can scale up the broad group. I heard earlier, interconnected, rehearsed communities. There is possibility therein. But in order to achieve that possibility, there has to be the appropriate frameworks. And I think that's another level of the conversation, of the team play. So to make change, to facilitate that actual operational collaboration, and perhaps even an integrated defense, we need the right policies. We've highlighted team play that works and where there is tension. How is this operational reality reflected perhaps in the policy domain? And first, let's turn to Thomas Rosteck.
Yeah, thank you, Geoff. So, just a quick word.
There's two Thomases. I would say go ahead. You've got the mic.
Sorry, I got confused.
You've got the mic, man.
I'm supposed to be Victoria tonight. I forgot about it. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
So I heard policy, and it was just went straight.
Jump right in.
The light bulb.
We like enthusiasm.
Because unlike my distinguished panelists who are really on the trenches dealing with cybersecurity, I'm a lawyer and I deal with legislations and governments as they enact policies around the world around cybersecurity, and we're seeing a slew of that happening. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is the team play actually is there for a variety of reasons. Because one is that governments need the expertise that people like us will bring, because our representative enterprise software companies whose software actually make everything that we do run. From the cloud, from artificial intelligence, from everything that we do. This is really about them, being on the trenches every day and doing the right thing. So bringing their expertise on the type of policies that is helpful. But also, they are there from a perspective of suppliers to governments. The governments are actually also customers of our own services, and actually relying on the ability of our companies to protect them, to protect their data. Now, sometimes, you feel the tensions when it comes to policy. And one of the examples that we've seen is we're seeing a lot of talks around sovereignty, digital sovereignty, data sovereignty when it comes to cybersecurity as a way to achieve, more robustness, more independence. One of the things that we saw, for instance, in Ukraine and what happened in the war that started about a year ago, they had some policies of data sovereignty with localization mandates. That is a reality, and we're seeing that happening. I'll go into later in details. We're seeing that happening at the European level at the moment. This is a terrible thing for cybersecurity, first of all. But second of all, it doesn't help in the operational side of things. So the Ukrainian government had to actually lift that up so that companies could help move the data from Ukraine that was being under attack to other secure locations in order to be able to continue their operations in that manner. So we know what matters. What's important from our perspective in Teamplay is that we need to have a real collaboration, and both industry and government need to understand that we're on the same team. We have similar objectives. Let's try to learn off of each other. Let's not be thinking that we know better, because either we do this thing on the trenches or we do the laws. So I think this Teamplay is extremely important, and we need to foster that even further moving forward.
It's really that communication nexus in your first point between those individuals that are developing and the frameworks that they need in order to carry that work forward in a secure by design manner. And the second piece on policies, sometimes perhaps not fitting the operational needs of the users. But now I'd like to turn to Thomas.
Okay.
And you're up.
Actually, I would like to see the policy topic a little broader. So first, there's one thing you need to know about me, which I'm an optimist. And what attests to this is I'm 20 years now in security, right? And I have a lot of contacts with also, let's say, government agencies. But and what I would like to basically broaden is policies is about, let's say, obviously first strategies. It's about regulations, but it's also, and now I come more to the industry field, it's also about standardization. And I think that's a super important thing. As I said, I'm an optimist, and I see on both sides, so on the government side as well as on the industry side, I see, to say it friendly, possibilities to improve. On the industry side, we face a challenge that building secure products today is not incentivized. It is difficult to sell a security product to a user, and I'm not talking about now critical infrastructure stuff. I'm talking about, for example, I was brave enough to install a smart home at home, and I hope it's going to be secure enough. So the incentivization for the provider of my smart home to do something secure is limited, because for me it's difficult to figure out how secure the thing is, right? So in this, especially in security, that's why I think there has to be some kind of a standard. The standard could be either, if the industry is clever, could be a standardization, the standardization including security with a possibility to kind of figure out what kind of how much meter of security I do get. And one good example, talking about smart homes, is the Meta initiative that's currently started, and security is a working group by itself in there from the beginning. And I think that's a good thing. If it doesn't work, then also I'm from industry and I don't like regulations too much, but if it doesn't work, we need regulations. And here, I think the critical piece is, how do we get a competence exchange in the private-public partnership? Because many government, let's say, regulators are not necessarily cyber experts, right? So how do we get this done? And that's not a complaint, because they have to deal with a whole lot of different things, right? So how do we get this done and how we work there? And there are initiatives, which perhaps we can come to later, for example, in the EU, that kind of show how that could work, how that can work.
Would it be fair for me to paraphrase that something you're saying is incentivize secure by design as opposed to secure by design or else? Is that a fair paraphrase?
I would say so. So the incentive can be either I can't sell if I fail, if I don't do it, or I can show how I compete, how I basically get it into a value system of the end user.
So I think we've gone a gambit on this optimism versus pessimism, because now we're leaning towards optimism. And I think to have optimism, you have to design, you have to plan what you need to execute upon. And I'd like to broaden the conversation. We talked a little bit about aspects of policy, aspects of of the ecosystem of product aspects than of the operational reality of the defenders. So I'm going to open it up to panelists. Let's talk a little bit about, if we've seen all of the ways where things can fail, what are the things that we can pinpoint we need to do more of to succeed? Maybe I'll start again, as I started the whole panel off with, Erkki.
I think the starting point for making this team play happening is motivation to do team play. So you need to have this motivation that we actually have to cross borders. We actually have to. We actually have a need to find different parties and actors around cybersecurity to work together. And I bring one example again from this cyber capacity building in third countries. And we have used here in western part of Europe that our politicians are already pretty well understanding cybersecurity, lasting point, but still. So it's very common when we go there. The first thing we do during these different governments and new nations, we do tabletop exercise. Then actually the government officials and politicians and communication experts and actors around the different agencies, government agencies, actually feel that they do not have collaboration. They actually do not have team play in place. And then when they actually feel that when we escalate different incidents and have this new crisis coming up and escalation goes up and blood pressure goes up, then they understand that they are missing something. And then the team play need comes in and they hunger wars is kind of a different awareness and trainings and activities to do that. So it starts with motivation, and when you did this team sport example, it also starts with motivation. We need to beat this opponent, or we need to achieve something. So the motivation is very important, and I think this is a start where most of the team play starts with better awareness that we are missing something or we need to do something better.
I think that's an incredibly important point. We talk a lot about exercising, but exercising means defining roles and responsibilities, leaning into those uncomfortable positions where you may not have a solution, and then identifying you need to work towards that solution together. And I'm reminded again of Wada-san's comment, cybersecurity by all, cybersecurity for all. I think that's an important comment in the context of exercising. We need to exercise like that. So I turn to Thomas. What do you think? Where are some ways that we can improve? Give us some optimism.
I think, first of all, I think to the point that you just made, I think if we all, and I'm going to say something that everybody knows in this room, which is cybersecurity is a never-ending issue. Right? It's not something that is ever finite. If we think we're done and we got there, I think we're going to fail. And I think that's what we need to do. And sometimes, my job is to talk to governments around the world on these things. And sometimes they think, well, we have the best law. We have the law that is going to set the standard. We're done. This is it. We can go home and be happy. And we said, no, this is exactly where you guys are wrong. This is where you actually need to focus even more, because by the time this actually comes to be implemented, then an industry is already like halfway there already, because you're not waiting for that. Then you need to continue with the next thing. And I think so that is a thing. I think the change in mentality is extremely important and needs to happen. And industry has a huge role to play. I think we at BSA, 5 years ago, we recognized there was a gap in software security, in the understanding that lawmakers around the world, including in the United States, had about that. And we came up with this software security framework that we used and developed in order to ensure to make people understand about how software is thought as a life cycle and how you need to address cybersecurity every step of the way, and things that goes on and on and on. And we actually work very closely with NIST in the United States, with ENISA in Europe, with MEDI in Japan, to talk about this as this is not the ideal solution and this is not the final thing, but this is our contribution to it. We want comment, we want criticism, but guys, take this, use it, and actually develop it further. I think collaboratively working together is what we need to be doing. So what we need to do is really see that governments and industry need to think on substantive outcomes. What are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve? And this is when the public-private partnerships actually works at their best, not when there's a specific or different, ways to arrive at the end game that is thought.
Yeah, and I would like to piggyback on the examples you just made and to emphasize one thing which is, I think, very important. What we have to make sure somehow, and I don't have a good solution, but that's why we are here, is we have to make somehow that we are not fragmenting the world, right? Every government has its own ideas about, even sometimes about crypto algorithms, right? Going that deep, have its own ideas about what needs to be done, and let's say as a semiconductor company, I will not be able to do, sorry to say, a chip for Belgium. Right? So that means we have to come to common solutions. That's why I like to see US, EU working together. At least EU coming up with one solution, right? One standard, going that, and that's why also the industry standards, which should work around the world, are super important for that. Because otherwise, we can wish for a lot, but it's not going to happen.
Geoff, if I may just piggyback on Thomas,
jump right in.
Just very, very quickly, no, I'm sorry. I totally agree, because if this is one thing that we're seeing, that there's a lot of willingness around the world, and at least in Europe for the last 10, 15 years, to do more about cybersecurity legislation. And we're seeing that in a variety of fields, from financial services sector to horizontal things. We're seeing that a lot. The issue that we're facing as an industry, global industries, is that different governments around the world do different ways and want to have different standards. This is not right. Like-minded countries, like-minded partners should actually work hand in hand. And this is not about creating competition, or no, it's about making sure that we have a secure world. All our society runs on today on digital, on software, on infrastructure. If we cannot protect that, then we all will fail collectively. So instead of trying to think, oh, we get a competitive advantage here or there, let's really try and ensure that industry, governments, like-minded again, like the liberal democracies that we all live in, actually work hand in hand and do not try to compete with each other on being, we're gonna bring the best standard. No, this makes no sense. The best standard is the one that's used by the entirety of the industry in order to achieve one specific objective, which is protecting whatever we're trying to protect on that particular matter.
Yeah, to a certain extent, and what I'm hearing is when you're dealing with technology and its safety, security, leaning into aspects of uniformity could lead us to aspects of interoperability and safety. How would any of these efforts help the team that you have each day, who, as we said at the beginning, is in the fight?
Could you just repeat?
So if you think about, let's open it up a little bit broader. When you think about things, like we've been talking about a lot of different concepts for improvement. The key here, though, is that improvement needs to improve the lives of the people that you work with each and every day, because they're in the fight. They're the defenders. What are ways that you think we can improve in total? And to a certain extent, if you were to kind of assign ways for there to be improvements, what would those be?
I think short term it's probably more difficult, because what I see that is missing is we're just a cyber defense team, and it's us in the only group in a company that needs to protect the company. It would be great if we can extend that to the complete company. But that requires a mindset, a security mindset. And I'm also what Thomas said about the incentive to have security and products. So I'm actually looking more at our next generation. So I think we should have digital security as a competence that you learn at school, that you understand what it is about. And in the same way as we have now with the environment, then the next generation will push for that. We'll then have, I'm now maybe being very naive, but then we have a company with security-minded people, independent if you're in marketing or sales, but you know it's important, so you'll take care that your brand website, for instance, is secure. But then also we have policymakers that will also take care of security, because they grew up understanding that security is something that we now need to take care of in this digital world.
Yeah.
So, and that would then help, I would say, my team in 20 years.
Well, that's good. 20 years isn't that far away if you think about it. Depends on what mindset you're thinking. It's really about building a community of defenders. And I think in contrast, something said a moment ago, not fragmenting the world. To me, and we talk about this oftentimes in cybersecurity also, it's about trust. And I have a belief that trust can be established not just between relationships. Trust can be established with institutions. Trust can be established between private sector partners, with government partners, with multilateral partners. That is how the team wins. So we have time for a few questions, and I would invite some questions from the audience. I know we're standing a little bit between here and the closing of the evening, but we very much would love for you guys to pick the brains of our great panel here. So we'll open it up. Questions? This is the best. So in NYC Cyber Command, we used to say, you should always ask yourself the first question. It breaks the silence. Go ahead.
No, I just make a point. Maybe it also starts some conversation. I very much liked in the morning when Kemba was talking about this whole community effort in cybersecurity, that everyone should take responsibility of their own cybersecurity. And as we think about our parents or grandparents, and when we think about our neighbors, there is a lot of not understanding what the cybersecurity is. And maybe the important part of our goals in the future should be having this cybersecurity part of everyday life more, like weather report in the morning. That part of the weather report in the morning, there is also cybersecurity, cyber weather report. That today we have this kind of a threats picture around, and we have this kind of possibilities and these actions around cyber. So it's when we think about how to utilize all this community towards being better aware, better ready for different kind of cyber, then this is something we should work on, and cyber weather will be a very nice attachment to that.
If I may, I would perhaps propose an alternative. Why should the user, the standard community, care about security? How can they? Because they are not the experts. They have no chance to do this, right? Even if I provide them with things, installing a firewall for many people is already a challenge, right? So I think we are responsible as an industry and also as a government government agencies to make that happen somehow. And a good example is, we can complain about the EU quite a bit, but this Cybersecurity Act that was installed is basically now trying to say, okay, what do I have to do? What kind of standard I have to set? What kind of certification I have to do to make IoT devices secure? Why is this important? IoT, by the way, is the next step of digitalization in my view. When we talk about digitalization, we usually talk about server farms, but actually all devices will be even more powerful in calculating. So all of them are have attack vectors that they can get there. So we need to make this secure. So the EU has set this up, and I'm in the advisory board of ENISA, so I'm close to this, and also it's the exchange between private and public partnerships here. So I like the approach. It could be a little bit faster.
So interestingly, this is the topic of the editorial that's in our sort of conference book, and I might propose conceptually there is a middle ground in some senses, and we see it in other disciplines. So a few weeks ago, I went to my son's classroom and taught a little bit about cybersecurity. He's all of 9 years old. And the kids had tons of questions. It was wonderful. They had no idea what I was talking about. The next presenter, wonderful, wonderful person, she was a local firefighter, a volunteer. And they knew exactly what she was talking about. Interestingly, it isn't that she was going to make each one of them fight fires. It was that they were conversant and they understood how important that function is, and they understood who was responsible for it. And I think that's an interesting middle ground that we see in other spaces. I see some hands in the back. Go ahead.
It's more of a thought-provoking question. Mike Boué, head of cybersecurity at Hayes. So if those of us remember when the internet came out, right? The internet didn't work so well. It didn't communicate so well. It didn't connect so well. Then IEEE was formed. Then OSI model was formed. And then all of a sudden, things worked, things connected, and we have the internet. From your minds, what prevents us? I mean, we did it for the internet. Why can't we do it in cybersecurity? What prevents us from achieving that same kind of aspiration that we achieve there in the cybersecurity space? What's the blocker there?
It's the incentive. So for the internet to work, for a function to work, for getting a benefit out of a function, that was, from my perspective, was clear. So the internet had some incentive. Also, some people wouldn't believe in it in the beginning, right? But anyway, it kind of worked, and I add features, and I benefit from the features. You add security, you don't even notice whether you benefit from this feature, right? So best case, you are not attacked. Second best case, you're attacked and the system is protecting you, right? It's like alarm systems in houses are usually built in after the first burglary. And I think that's one of the major topic. What I mean with incentive, and the incentive, I think the industry to a certain degree has understood that why nearly all the standards that are worked on right now take security into account. But in some cases it's not really realized, and here we have to think about different means, which could be a regulation then.
I think another challenge is legacy systems. It's like with the house. Like the house that's already there doesn't have an alarm system until you get then visitors. A new house probably has the alarm system. So that's how I see it, at least from my point of view. My company, legacy, is really much more difficult to secure.
Just maybe one thing also, and maybe, don't want to sound like a broken record, but sometimes we also see, at least in the policy space, the number of overlapping and inconsistent requirements that fall upon companies when it comes to cybersecurity. And we were dealing, the last term in the European Union, in Brussels, with different legislations that had similar views, which is how do you protect cybersecurity in the financial services sector. And then you don't involve the cybersecurity experts. You don't involve the cybersecurity agencies. You have different reporting lines. You have different regulators. You have different structures. You have different. And at the end of the day, companies will have to provide security for both, for the financial services sector and for others. Are like, what do we do here? What is the thing? And then you add to this quite, stringent penalties. And then you get companies like deer stuck in the headlights. Like, what do we do here? What is the thing? And so I think, again, the issue that we're facing when it comes to developing policies take time. Policies need to be forward-thinking, forward-leaning. There needs to be a lot of collaboration. There needs to be a lot of understanding, and not just paying lip service, because we're seeing a lot of lip service. Oh yeah, we're going to work with our global partners. But then, when push comes to shove, things are actually being different. And as I was mentioning a minute ago, and Thomas mentioned it, there's work being done in Europe for certification for cloud computing's cybersecurity. Great. But part of this, we're imposing data localization mandates, for the highest. I mean, first of all, from an operational perspective, that makes no sense. Second, that would really limit the pool of companies that are able to provide services. And then we're seeing that this push is happening. We're seeing a lot of companies from a lot of sectors. You have, the banking sector. You have some, cross-sectoral sectors that are saying, if you do this, you're going to put us out of business. You're going to actually really put our business in danger. But then we don't see a lot of movement to push past this. So we need to be a lot more realistic, and we need to be a lot more, understanding that we need to focus on the outcomes, regardless of what the solution in the end is.
So you're highlighting a disconnect between the operational reality, the business risk adjustments, and the policies that are being proposed. Very interesting. I'm going to give, if there are some questions. All right, I see some. Then let's have some questions. We've got time.
Hey, my name is Timo, and I just want to raise the question or pick up the topic between teamwork or liquid workforce and staff shortage. Is it really like that, or is it just like I'm specialized into identity and access management? So we have on Stepstone 25 to 30 new jobs each week, maybe each day. So every company is trying to build up its own team, its own specialization. Why do we not really care about liquid workforce and really try to bring it in?
So 2 examples I provided in the start are basically the short-time missions to somewhere, to this critical infrastructure company which is struggling with cyber attack, or this third country which is struggling with cyber capacity. So it's 2 models which actually work for these persons to have this permanent job in somewhere, and they have this short time doing something somewhere and learning and experiencing different kind of activities. So I think the models are possible. It's not easy. We have this scarce of cybersecurity experts everywhere, but I think you are in the right direction. We should utilize more cyber experts' competencies outside of their daily work, giving them more kind of also excitement and also more experiences outside of this setting. There are always this kind of security clearances and information sharing challenges around it, but still it's a good way to enrich work life and at the same time solve this kind of a scarce of cybersecurity experts.
The challenge that I see is that even if you're a cybersecurity expert, every company is different, and it takes a long time to understand the company. So to really do the incident handling in the company. So we're, for instance, now onboarding a lot of people, and they're really good. But we notice like, oh, it really takes time until they understand how that specific network, how that specific company, who's who, like it's on different levels. Technology and also network, like people, is built up. And that's just like, you get experience with each incident, basically. And that's why I would say it's not that easy to move people around across different companies. But it's of course something that, if that would be possible from a labor law point of view, you could build up. But it takes time.
I would actually also look at it from being an optimist from a different perspective. I have a problem with cyber experts. In an earlier panel, it was said you need a mindset in an organization coming from the board down to the experts. So there has to be a basic understanding about cybersecurity, like everywhere, right? So I like what our armed forces colleague told, that the University of the Bundeswehr has like 12 professors on cybersecurity. Is, I think, something exceptional. Usually in a university, if you find it at all, it's a subtopic under IT, right? Something like that. It should be embedded in it, so it's an educational topic, and from that perspective, this doesn't solve it short term, but it should solve it long term. We have to have a basic understanding. That's also then the internal selling of what is needed is just not necessary anymore.
So perhaps then a closing thought. We began this panel thinking about team play, and I brought up my one job, but I do have 2, and they're both involved in sports, solo sports and team sports. And I have to say, caring a lot about defenders, I've never once heard a coach send them out to compete with something like, "You'll probably lose today, and we'll pick up the pieces afterwards." Like, I've never heard that rallying cry. But in reality, we've been saying that to our cyber defenders for a very long time. And I think if the consensus is that we must leverage team play if we're going to win, then I think this panel might also say we owe our defenders a little bit more of a rallying cry. Like, the challenge is not all the ideas we maybe have, it is the execution that will make their lives better. And I think we can execute as a team, and we can do that through legislation, through policies, through standards, in our technology, in what we're delivering as products and what we're using, and of course in our processes between governments, private sector, multinationals, NGOs. Everyone needs to be involved, academics included. We do this right, and we can win. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To stress this.